State Representative Ramon Romero of Fort Worth. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
So this week, as you know, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, United States, in New Orleans is holding a hearing on SB 4.
Right.
How do you think this is all going to shake out?
Well, in the Fifth Circuit, I hope that they're able to keep the stay in place at least, and we know it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and ultimately it'll get to the Supreme Court, and I hope that they've taken the same, they will take the same position as the Arizona case, at which point that they will not necessarily condemn Texas, but remind Texas that this is a federal responsibility, and we cannot have a disorganized, combative environment between federal and state law officials. We just can't have that. We're not going to have law enforcement fighting other law enforcement for sake of visual aids for their political campaigns. It's a mess right now. I think we all acknowledge what's happening at the border needs to change. And I think that all the justices, whether it's from the lower courts or the Supreme Court, agree. But the method at which we're going to combat this issue is not going to be by having law enforcement or state fight federals.
So what do you think is the solution to what's going on at the border?
Well, look, I mean, I think that the numbers of asylum seekers is going to have to be cut down. I mean, there's no question. I think that as long as people know that there's a large number, that you have international law that supports you, they're going to keep coming. And look, I mean, I always have to remind people only come or only migrate for two reasons: they're hungry or they're scared. And as Americans, we have to decide, like, how many of these folks that are hungry or scared are we going to continue to let into our country, and how are we going to support them? And that's what I talked about earlier. It's like, if you're not sympathetic towards that need, okay, that's fine. Don't be sympathetic for that need. If you're not sympathetic for DACA, even though we used to be a little bit more, but the border has actually changed people's sentiment about DACA. We should have some sympathy for our own pocketbook, and that's not having a workforce that can keep up with this incredible growth that we're facing here in Texas is not a mathematical equation that makes sense. And as someone this is my 30th year in business, Jack, 30 years. And what I have to pay for a day laborer today, I have to pass on to every homeowner that I do business with. And I think homeowners are going to be really upset when they continue to see a higher appraisal, thus higher taxes for themselves, and at some point, an inability to stay in a home. So look, Texas has opportunities. Workforce authorizations, work permit authorizations is low-hanging fruit. We know we need skilled workers. These are not people that are just coming in here taking the lowest farm jobs. Some of them are, but a lot of them are skilled workers. We're talking about electricians, school teachers, stonemasons, people that can hang sheetrock and hang it well. And that's what I think all Texans, all Americans are really going to agree on.
You attended a news conference, you spoke at a news conference,
Yeah.
where you urged President Biden to increase the number of work authorizations.
Correct.
That was part of this bipartisan bill that was developed in the Senate that hasn't gone anywhere. And so I'm wondering, are you calling on President Biden to do an executive order to increase these work authorizations?
I think we would like to see that happen, Jack. We would like to see some action taken today that's going to relieve some of the pressure on all of us Texans here that are facing an increase in cost, whether that's through real inflation or artificial inflation. This border problem is a real inflation motivator.
How so?
Well, look, think about it. I used to pay $110 a day for a laborer. Now it's $200. That's 5 persons, 4 persons on a cleanup job, as an example. It all gets passed on back to you.
Why has it gone up so much?
Because no one's available anymore. No one is available. I mean, people used to say, no one will do this job. No one is there to do the good jobs anymore. So what happens is there are crews out there, but you have to wait for them. So a house that used to get built in 2 or 3 months now gets built in 6 months. And the consumer ultimately pays for that debt service. It just costs more money. And that's the point that I made during the press conference. How fair is it to a young family that built a home 3 or 4 years ago, and then the neighbor next door builds a house now, and the same house, same square footage, same countertops, now cost $100,000 more money? They paid that, and now they're equal in value, which means my taxes went up to the cost of that house. That's a lot more money out of households. And this is a simple solution. Allow people to hire. Allow me to prove to the federal government, I'm trying to hire and I can't fill this high-skilled job.
So who would be eligible, for these work authorizations?
So in most cases, what would happen is me as an employer, I have to say, listen, I have stonemasons, I have a need for 30 stonemasons, and I just don't have any. I have a need for electricians, and I just don't have any. I have a need for sheetrock layers, and I don't have any. So you petition the feds and prove to the feds that you've not been able to fill those jobs. Mexico is eager. Other countries are eager and willing to cull through their workforce, send those people to the U.S. on a temporary work visa. Allow that person to drive. We know exactly who that person is. We know they're safe. We know they're secure. They don't have criminal records. They'll come to work for us. They'll go back home. That would be a start for us to alleviate some of these costs and would have a direct result on inflation. The problem is, and here's the problem for Biden, is he going to do this right now? The other side will just say proof that these are open borders and he's letting more people in. So the only way it's going to happen is if Americans on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, say, I'm uber frustrated with the cost of building today, and I'm uber frustrated that my appraisal went up so much, and you have to do something about it. Because people are moving. Texas suffers from it more than anywhere else. People are moving to Texas. They're not stopping. They're coming here, and especially the DFW region. So all of us here, Democrats, Republicans, we see that the Texas House is not responding. I mean, we have an overwhelming $32 billion surplus, which is a $32 billion over-collection of taxes, and a $20+ billion rollover of funds that we didn't spend. Texans were collected in 2021 and 2022. We did not appropriate in 2023. We're not going to appropriate in 2024. We may do it in 2025 just to receive that money in 2026. How can you take $20 billion out of our economy and not think that it's going to affect inflation? We have lots of money. We can create real solutions right now, and we're just not acting. So I think all of us, instead of being angry about asylum seekers that are standing at our wall, at our doorsteps, we should be angry at our government to say, just do it now. All of us should be really angry at DC for not passing that bipartisan bill. This is a bill that if we were still talking about the Gang of Eight many years ago, this would have been a dream for them as on the Republican side to have gotten such a bill. And it's just disappointing. As someone that's a construction owner, a small business owner, I never thought that this is what government was going to look like, that we would be at such a stalemate over one issue. And it's sad that political campaigns have been able to use this to really divide us as Americans. When I go build swimming pools, I don't ask somebody if they're Democrat or Republican. I just tell them what it's going to cost. And then we negotiate. And in the pool industry, as an example, I believe people should have that beautiful backyard where we can all swim in and kind of build memories in. This thing, pools are just getting so far out of reach for so many families. Cost going up 30% year after year since COVID. There's solutions, and that is welcome the people that have the skills. Even a lot of the folks that are here, Jack, that's the problem. We have people that are here that have been here since the 90s. They used to have driver's licenses, and now we've taken away their driver's licenses, direct cost to employers, because now I actually have an employer has to hire a driver for a foreman because that person is so valuable.
You're talking about dreamers.
Oh yeah, dreamers, or even just their parents as an example. The parents of dreamers who came here a long time ago, who had great jobs, who have the skills to perform and make the cost of your home lower. But now we're telling them we don't want you in the workforce. And some of those folks are sitting around waiting, hoping that there was going to be some sort of immigration reform, or they're working as independent contractors. They're not paying into Texas unemployment law. They're not paying into FICA and Social Security and Medicare. So, and folks are not mad that we're not helping them pay their taxes. Not demanding, just allow it.
I wanted to ask you brought up campaigns, and so I wanted to ask you about the politics of what's going on in the Texas House right now.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
How concerned are you that Speaker Phelan may not win his runoff election?
I'm very concerned. I think that Speaker Phelan has been really clear in that we don't want to be like Washington. And there are people in the Texas House and outside of the House, powers that be, super wealthy billionaires that say, I want it to be an all or nothing. If we have a majority in the Texas House, we want to pass every single policy, and we're going to get our way because the people of Texas have spoken. Well, the people of Texas are within a 10%, variable. If Dave Phelan does not get elected, there will not be Democratic agenda items that are important to them. And those may be issues like birth control. They may be issues with like postpartum, support for mothers. They would be issues for TANF, food stamps. Food stamps don't just go they go to the most needy. And what happens a lot of times, those are Democratic bills that are being pushed forward, and we all agree on them. Now what the agenda that's being pushed is, don't agree with anything that a Democrat has to say. Don't agree with anything from an urban area. Don't fund those. Take care of our issues first. It's at zero. We're not going to help them at all. Dade has said, and I think Dade was like former Speaker Strauss. When I went into the House, Speaker Strauss sat with me, same as you and I are sitting here today, and he says, Ramon, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your business. I want to know what you have to offer the state of Texas. And he was clear in that. And he put me in a place where I could put everything that I've learned in my 30 years of business in supporting the state and all of its residents. If Texans want that to change, then you're going to fall in with that far right that says Dade Phelan was not a good speaker. I disagree with a lot of what Dade Phelan did as a speaker. Because I'm from a different party. I think that we could have done a lot more to lower taxes. I think we could have done a lot more to change appraisals. But Dade Phelan, at least, is not going to be one of those folks that don't believe in supporting all Texans. And I think that that's what's on the table right now. But I have faith that Dade Phelan is going to pull out his race. And when he pulls out his race, he's going to be able to reestablish to the members of the House that we are an equal branch of government on the House side and the Senate side and the executive, the governor's office. It is not in the benefit of Texans to have the House be run over by the Senate and have one person running the entire state of Texas, and that's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. That's not the case. It should never be the case. It's not the way democracy is supposed to work. I'll tell you the way democracy is supposed to work. I wish there could only be 75-75. And we would be forced to communicate and negotiate with one another, and the best policy would always come forward. Because when one has all, that's the bully in the room. And we're not going to support that. So, look, I think Dade's going to win. I think the people of his district recognize that his family has been in that district for a long time, and I think people are actually going to perform. And I think I think Democrats are going to vote for them. If they didn't vote in the Democratic primary, I think Democrats are going to have an opportunity to decide who is going to be my state representative in Beaumont.
You think that's going to happen?
I think they should. If I were a Democrat in Beaumont, and for whatever reason, I wasn't able to make it to the polls, I would be going out there voting for otherwise you're silent. But I would be voting for Dade Phelan. There's no question. And not because, look, I'm not in the speaker's team. I have not been in favor with this current speakership. But I do know Dade Phelan, and I know his family. And I think that the man has a good heart, and he's the kind of guy that would be good for Texas. And it's also going to be able to tell all the reps that, say, for example, voted against vouchers and had a target put on their back by Governor Abbott, that you still have to represent your district, not represent your party. And I think for folks all over rural Texas, they should really be paying attention to that. Maybe their person lost, but a very, very small percentage of people voted. And we have, and I'm preaching to the choir here, Jack, when we have less than 10% of our electorate, or 15% in some cases, voting in the primaries, that's a very small amount of people deciding who's going to be in our office, especially after the gerrymandering and the redistricting cycle that happened. Look, there's very few seats that are toss-ups between Democrats and Republicans. You're going to have one kind of Republican or another right now. And I think the biggest division is, are you an all or nothing Republican versus the traditional Texan, which is, politics is over, buddy. It's time to get to work.
So let me ask you, you said you think that Speaker Phelan is going to win the runoff. Do you think he would still be able to retain his speakership in January?
Yeah, I think he will. I think, because look, we are an independent branch of government, and anyone that comes in outside of Dade Phelan is going to feel like they have to play the game, the governor's game or the lieutenant governor's game. Dade Phelan, after every attack he's gotten from the Senate and from the House, is going to be able to stand tall and be very clear that I'm for you and your district. And I am willing to fight another fight the way I just ran this race. and win for you so that you can represent your district, so that you can not be afraid that one vote at which your district you polled and they told you that's the way they wanted you to vote is not going to be the reason why you don't come back and continue to serve the state of Texas. I really believe that that's what's going to have to happen.
I wanted to ask you about school choice. You brought it up a little bit. Do you think that this is going to pass under, based on the number of people that we've seen incumbents lose and the numbers of the incumbents who are in runoffs? Obviously, the governor has put his money where his mouth is to try to make this happen.
Well, he put one super wealthy person's money where their mouth is when you get a $6 million campaign contribution and then you spend $6.6 million of that. I think it's a pretty direct number to look at. This was the number one issue. It was his number one issue because they voted against him, but he didn't use that issue to beat those people. If you look at Glenn Rogers as an example, the number one issue that he was saying is he did not have my back. He didn't have my back on border security. But the governor I think he took a step too far when he takes someone like Representative Darby of San Angelo and he calls him a liar. This is the state of Texas, and I'm from Fort Worth, and I was telling someone, someone used to call you a liar back in the olden days. You'd hear the, we're gonna have an old shootout, Are you kidding me? You don't call someone a liar who's been serving the state of Texas for as long as Drew Darby has and represents San Angelo well. So do I fear that they would get the numbers? I think that they're going to get really close. That's another reason why Dade Phelan would be supportive of continuing to support your district. And those folks that come in, now when they become state reps, maybe they're actually going to see the gravity of what they're actually have before them. And they're going to either serve the citizens of Texas or they're going to serve the people that got them there, right? So I do feel like this is a lot closer. It's within a handful of votes now. I think that ultimately it will pass, and the only way it will not pass is if citizens say they're not interested in defunding public education, because that's really what this is all about. But I will give it to Governor Abbott. And this is what I have to tell to my Democratic colleagues of where the Republican Party is so much better than the Democratic Party. Every single private school parent now believes that Governor Abbott wants to give them a $10,000 check. Every parent who's got 2 kids in private schools right now is going to get $20,000 for Governor Abbott. $30,000, $40,000, a free check, free money to private school parents. So even in failure, those private school parents now look at Governor Abbott and say, he's for us. He's for our family, instead of being for all Texas kids, which the downside to this voucher fight is they've continued to tell all our private school kids that private schools are not good schools. I'm sorry, public schools are not good schools. So you have kids all throughout public education that have been told year after year after year, your school sucks. And it's having a direct effect on whether they even show up to school and how they treat their teachers. And I think that that's where Governor Abbott needs to get into the workforce. Go to work for a day with your teachers and actually see what it's like to educate Texas kids today. And I think you'd have a different attitude. But look, he's a wise man, but he's a really, really smart politician.
State Representative Ramon Romero, Fort Worth, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. Glad to be here.